All right, so welcome. So this is Awaken Coach Institute's community event in which we are discussing how to prepare for our ICF credentialing exam. And so I'm recognizing there's still a lot of people showing up a few minutes after the hour. So welcome everyone. And we're going to jump right in. Normally we spend a bit of time introducing ourselves to each other, but I'd like it if we can save that till the end, because I want to make sure we have lots of spacious time to ask questions once we've gone through the material. So if it's good with you, we'll jump right in. So I've got my virtual assistant, also my adult child here, Kiara, who is co-hosting with me. And Kiara, you can go ahead and share your screen as we start talking through how this exam goes. All right, so we are all here together to learn how to prepare for the written exam. And I just want to be clear that we're talking about the written exam, not the oral exam, because when you graduate from Awaken Coach Institute and you've taken our mentor coaching, our exam will be counting for the oral exam. So there's nothing else you need to submit. And so what we're talking about here is when you go for your credential, regardless of if it's the ACC, PCC, or MCC credential, you'll upload your certification from your coaching school that shows that you've done the hours of training and the mentor coaching that you need. And once you've applied, they will go ahead and give you access to the written exam. And so that's the one that we're talking about today. So go ahead, next slide, Kiara. And so this is a very new exam. When I took the exam 10 years ago, or however long it was based on a former set of competencies. There used to be 11 competencies, and now the exam as of 2022 is based on the updated ICF core competencies, and there are 8 of them. So what I want to do is put in the chat a link to the PCC markers. Oh, I'm hearing a message from Janine in the chat that some people are joining because there was an issue with the link. In fact, let me go make sure that I'm going to copy the link and put it in our alumni group in case people are struggling to find us. We did change our Zoom room number a week or so ago, so some people might be using an older number. Okay, so what we're talking about here is preparing for our ICF credentialing exam, which is a written exam. And it is now an exam that is proctored by an outside company called Pearson VUE. And so that company has been hired to either proctor the exam in person, so you can schedule an appointment at one of their sites near you, or you can take it from home. And if you take it from home, there's a bit of tech that you're going to be requested to do, and you'll be in contact with Pearson VUE. And so they will send you a whole lot of information about exactly how to prepare your space. And you're going to want to show up to the exam about half an hour in advance, because there is a certain amount of tech you need to do. So first of all, you need to download their software in advance and check that everything's working, your camera's working, your sound is working. And you do want to make sure that your tech is settled before you actually come into the actual day of the exam, because some people have had issues with it, and it's really nice to not have to be thinking about tech when you want to be thinking about coaching and getting yourself into a coaching mindset and all of that. So what happens with the tech is they will actually ask you to take photographs of your surroundings to make sure you do not have so much as a scrap of paper or a Kleenex or anything sitting around that may compromise the test. The way their software works is it shuts down every other tab on your computer, and you can only have one screen. You can't have any other screens attached to it. So you'll be there with your laptop, assuming you're taking this at home, in a place where no one can speak to you and you cannot speak to anyone else, and where you cannot possibly see any answers. So that's sort of the tech side. And then once you go through that sort of, some people get the jitters about it. Once you actually get into the exam, that's when hopefully you've taken your coaching course and you've seen the 8 core competencies a gazillion times, and you've gone through your mentor coaching and assessed yourself a bunch of times using the PCC markers. And so you've practically got them memorized. You show up for the exam and you feel this nice sigh of pleasant relief because you're going into coaching scenarios. And so the way that they have it set up is they will give you a question in which you are going to be called upon to choose both the best and the worst possible coaching response given what they've given in their scenario. And so my intention today is for us to go through 8 different scenarios, 1 per competency, and we're going to talk through it together and select which one do we think is the best and the worst, and which one does the ICF think is the best and the worst, and see what we can learn together. Go ahead, Kiara. All right, and so I think these should look pretty familiar to all of you. I know that anyone who's graduated from Awaken Coach Institute has seen these. You know that the foundation of coaching, these are not assessed in your audio, but they are the foundation of everything we do as coaches. You're going to want to have read the Code of Ethics and know it fairly well. There will be questions about the Code of Ethics. I will be sharing this slide deck afterwards. Everyone who's here today and everyone who's registered will receive the replay and the slide deck. So you don't need to take notes particularly. So you're going to want to make sure you've read and understood the Code of Ethics, because there will be questions about it, as well as about the coaching mindset, which is not, it's also one of those that is a prerequisite for grading your recording, but they don't actually listen to it specifically, but it's wanting to know, are you learning and growing? All those good things that you can find in the ICF core competencies. So that's another document you're going to want to practically have memorized. I think you'll recognize domain 2. That's when we start, you know, we always learn competency 3, competency 4, competency 5. What are the exact skills that you're using there? Go ahead to the next slide, Kiara. And you'll recognize the rest of them as well. And so what you're actually going to get your scores very quickly after you take the exam. So exactly, Janine, it is completely notes free. It is closed book, and in a very specific way where you actually have to take photographs of your space. And I've even heard a story from someone who had to move his Kleenex box out of reach and show the proctor of the exam exactly where he had moved his Kleenex box, because they didn't want even so much as a cardboard box or anything. Yes, Nige says they are annoying. So just be prepared for very picky, annoying testing proctors before you get started, and try to try to just calm yourself, maybe take a minute as you get into the exam so that you're in coaching state and not in annoyance at the proctor's state when you get into the test. So the way the test is starting February 1st, 2022, is that you get access to the first 41 questions. Then you can have a 5-minute break. Once you've left to use the bathroom or whatever you want to do during that 5 minutes, you won't be able to come back to those first questions. And so that part is done. Then they will open up the next 40 questions and you can get started on those. All right. So go ahead, Kiara. We are gonna do some practice. All right. So thank you, Yogesh. You're exactly right. Yes, taking the test from home saves you some driving, and just take a deep breath about the proctors. They are not with the ICF. They are not with Awaken Coach Institute. They are there to make sure you're following very picky rules. But we will not let that stop us from fearlessly going on. So we're going to start with practice question number 1. You guys ready to interact? Who would be willing to read out this first slide? I can't actually see you right now, so if you're jumping in, please do. Maybe I can call on Val to read it.
Sure, I'd be happy to.
Thank you.
You bet. A coach is meeting with a prospective client who is growing a new business. The coach and potential client quickly establish an easy connection. The coach is excited about the opportunity to work with the client. As the coach and client are ending their conversation, the prospective client briefly mentions the name of their new business. The coach recognizes the business as the coach is an investor in a more established competitor business in the same community. What should the coach do?
All right. So, do we want to? I think Pakinan just raised a hand. Yes.
Shall we go for an answer, or you will be giving a comment on the scenario?
Yeah, I would love it if you go ahead. Maybe Kiara, go back a slide. So we're going to give you, for each of these practice questions, go ahead to the question itself, Kiara, that Val just read. I'd love it if you guys want to take a guess. What should the coach do?
I just typed remain neutral, ignore.
Okay. Anyone else want to make a guess?
Yeah, I'll go for the same answer. I wouldn't even mention anything related to the field or that I'm investing with the competitor or anything like that.
Okay. Let's go take a look at the options, and we're going to look at the best and the worst options. And again, I cannot see you, so there's people raising hands. I can tell. Just go ahead and speak up.
I've put my hand up because I've also put in the meeting chat. I hope the questions are all that easy.
Okay, was this easy for you?
Without a doubt. Although I could be really wrong.
Yeah, we could be.
I think the best answer is number 4, share their role as an investor in a competing business and acknowledge the possibility of conflicts of interest with the client. And the worst one is not say anything. Try to keep their role as an investor in a competing business separate from their role as a coach.
Okay. And which of the core competencies is this related to?
See, that's where I fall down. I don't remember them all off pat.
Well, I'm going to give you a hint.
It's about integrity.
Yeah, so it's ethics, right? Which is competency 1. I'm actually going in order here, one competency at a time, so you can kind of have that in mind. And what I would recommend for all of us is, I put in the chat earlier, and maybe I'll just put it in the chat again, is a link to the PCC markers. I'll just go stick it in there again. Make sure you go to the updated ones, not the, it says current, but they're not current anymore. They're quite old. Go to the updated markers. And yes, you need to know ethics scenarios and what you should do in this kind of situation. That'll be 12% of the points. So if, does anyone else want to make a comment or a guess about this?
I agree. I think 4 is the best, 1's the worst.
Okay, so definitely share with them that you have a competing conflict of interest, and the worst thing to do is not say anything.
Yeah.
Okay,
Which is
let's.
not, tell you.
Okay, let us go to the ICFs, best and worst. How did we do, guys?
Whoa, okay.
Yeah, okay, so we're learning. This is good to know. We've got to read that code of ethics and know what to do in these practical scenarios. Okay, great.
Yes.
All right, so let's give ourselves a round of applause. Next slide, Kiara, for our learning. Both those of us who were, pretty clear about what to do, and also those of us who learned something about ethics. All right, who would like to read question number 2? Can I call on Abby?
Yes. A client struggles with delegating tasks at work to other team members. During the last session, the client shared that an important project they are leading is falling behind schedule. The coach supported the client in identifying strategies to delegate tasks to other team members. At the next session, the client reports back and shares, "In the end, I decided to complete all the tasks myself. That was the only way to get them done on time." The coach feels disappointment that the client did not follow through on their plans to delegate. What should the coach do?
Thank you. All right, so what are the principles underlying this? We're looking at competency 2, embodies a coaching mindset that's open, curious, flexible, and client-centered. So what comments do you want to make before we start looking at the answers? Okay, Liani says the client stays at choice. Any other principles that would be important to say? All right, stay curious, stay out of judgment. All right, keep on learning. Great, thank you. Okay, Kiara, let's go to the options. And once again, we are going to be saying the best and the worst option. So what are we going to guess for this one? Going to see if I can look at the chat, and go ahead and speak for those of you who can. Yogesh, you're raising your hand. Go ahead.
I think end of the day, like what the client does is their responsibility. So you shouldn't really challenge them upfront, right? So I'd say set aside your disappointment, go ahead with what you want to talk about in that session, and then maybe use one of the future sessions to reflect in terms of why would the client have gone the way, the route that they did. That I think probably would be the best option. And then maybe the worst option would be to immediately reflect back on the last session with the client and identify. So I'd say 3 and 1 are probably my choices.
Okay, thank you. Who else would like to make a comment? I see there's 2 people with raised hands. So Pakinam?
I'll go for option number 4 as the best option. And option number 2 as the worst.
Okay. I'm going to guess that anytime the ICF uses words like praise or immediately, those are unlikely to be the best options, because coaches don't actually use praise. We use acknowledgement, we use encouragement, we use active listening, we use support. And we don't actually praise clients, and we don't ask why questions. We usually would ask, what What are you noticing about yourself with what you did and didn't do since we last talked? Those kinds of things. I'm guessing the word immediately is likely to be a red flag because you probably remember in competency 5 that we like to leave plenty of time for silence, pause, reflection, curiosity, support, acting in response to the client. Who else would like to make a comment about what you think would be a good or a bad thing to do here as a coach?
I also like option 2. I think there's something important about taking a breath, recognizing the emotion that the coach had, but then actually recognizing it's client-centered. So, but I can see 3 as well, but I think 2 is allowing the coach to recenter so that they're offering their best to the client for the session.
Yeah, and taking a breath is almost always going to be a really good option, depending on what you do afterwards. Okay, so you're saying you would say 2 is the best. Any insight into what would be the worst?
I think the first one might be the worst for me. I think it's a bit shaming.
And also it is like telling while we don't tell when we coach.
Yeah. Okay. Let's go see what the ICF says is the best and worst. How does that all land with us?
Yeah, it makes more sense.
Yeah, a lot of us didn't really like 4. It doesn't really feel all that open to the client being able to make their own choices. It sounds like the coach is coming in with their opinions about what they thought was good or bad, and asking those why questions, which are usually not a good idea.
Christy, Val here.
Yes.
I have a quick question. Just 2 observations and a question. This might not be true 100% of the time, but I would tend to think that the word failure would be in that same category as immediately.
Yeah.
And the word that you mentioned, I tend to think they probably wouldn't use that word as a best choice. I do have a question. Could we go back to the previous slide that for number 3, where it spoke about reflecting on, there we go, reflecting on the situation during an upcoming situation with their mentor coach. There's a lot that could be read into that. I would typically think that this situation, it sounds like it triggered the coach personally, and wouldn't that be more apt to talk about in a supervised coaching session? And would that have been thought about here by the ICF as opposed to the mentor coaching, and that's why it wasn't the best?
I have a feeling they're putting mentor coaching and supervision sort of in the same category.
Okay.
I think what they're trying to do with these kinds of questions is have a really clear, like, oh, please don't do that. Please don't praise your client and then ask a why question. Like, that's not coaching, right? And then they have these sort of like, okay, yeah, as long as you're setting aside your disappointment and getting back focused, you can go talk to your mentor coach. Like, that's not wrong. Right. And for a new coach, could be a perfectly adequate thing to do. Even better is if you can get to the point where you can just say, okay, yeah, well, so you chose not to do these things. What's going on? What's happening with you? And so it's really like the gradations between the best, the worst, and some mediocre. So it's not that it's wrong, but it's maybe just not, oh, wow, yeah, I wish I could get to that point in my coaching where I could remember to just like, yeah, I don't need to be disappointed about this because it's my client's life. It's my client's choice. Does that help?
Yeah, it's a very helpful distinction. I'd love to see the option where it's number 2, and then if it's a repeated pattern, that the combination of now the coach recognizes to take that into their mentor / supervised coaching sessions.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And we can always bring things up with mentor coaching. And even better is if we get good enough to know, yeah, let's support the client's choices and find out more, demonstrate curiosity and interest and learning here. That would be even better. All right. We ready to move on? So congratulations to all of us again for learning and being willing to be vulnerable and ask our questions here. All right. Could I get Cedra, are you willing to ask the next question? You may not be able to speak. Karen from Circle River Coaching, are you able to read the next question?
Yeah,
Thank you.
I can read it. A client comes to a session appearing stressed. When the coach asks what the client wants to talk about, the client frantically lists a major event they're planning at work, a large family gathering they're organizing, and caring for their aging parents. What should the coach do?
Okay, so let's stay on this slide. What are the principles here that we want to keep in mind? So they're coming into the session. So we're going to want to be doing 2 things. We're going to be wanting to set the agreement while also creating trust and safety, right? So we've got some comments. We're doing contracting here. We're setting an agreement. And so what do we do when the client comes in stressed and listing several things to talk about?
I have a thought.
Tell us your thought, Karen.
Oh, sorry, I didn't realize I unmuted.
You're still unmuted.
I'm still muted.
No, go ahead. We can hear you.
So a lot of times when this happens, which seems to happen quite often, I just offer the client the opportunity, ask them if it would help to just take a breath, or if there's anything that they would like to do to just kind of get to that quiet space and see what, if anything comes up that they would like to talk about. So, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So I guess offer them a choice on what might help them, come to that place.
Okay. So offering a choice is definitely one of our principles that is at work. You would offer them a moment to take a breath. What other comments? Okay, Cedra would ask them to breathe and relax. Let's and what about this list of different things? Okay, Leanne might ask, what do all those 3 things have in common? Okay, great. Let's go to the next slide and see what the options are. And we're looking for the best and the worst again. So there could be 3 perfectly adequate options. Which one would be the best one, especially given that we're in the contracting stage here?
Three for me.
Okay. So you would acknowledge that the client has shared 3 significant challenges and give them the choice of what they would like to explore first. Any other best options? Okay.
Well,
Sophie is also saying 3. Okay. Worst option. Val is saying the worst option is to ask them to share about their aging parents. It's a little tricky to figure out which one is the worst, right?
Surely it's the one that calls them stressed, isn't it?
What's that?
Surely it's the one that says they're stressed.
Oh, yeah. If you're naming the client's emotion for them without asking, that's not a great choice, right? Like, do you need to take a moment? You look stressed. I mean, I don't know that we would ever say it like that, but that's very different from like, okay, what would you like before we get started so you can settle into the session today? You know, I think that would be perfectly adequate, but saying, do you need a minute because you look stressed? Probably not. All right. Let's see what the ICF picks as their best and worst. All right, so some of us nailed that one. We acknowledge that you shared 3 significant challenges. What would you like to explore first? And I think Leanne's choice would be, if they had a better than best, you could even ask them, you know, how are those related to each other? That would be kind of a more advanced skill, but among the options that they gave us, asking which one they want to explore first is offering the choice to the client, right? And if the coach picks instead of letting the client pick, so either by saying, tell me about your aging parents, or if they say, let's begin with the major event you're planning. You mentioned that first, so let's start with that. And that is clearly the coach leading the session instead of the client. And so we don't really ever want to do that. Any other comments we have about this one? Or learning? It can be kind of tricky, huh? All right, well, let's give ourselves a clap for learning. And I think our curiosity and interest is getting piqued to maybe go back through the competencies again and see what is the wording that's used, and how do we use these markers? All right. Cedra, did you want to try and read this one again? Just make sure you're unmuted.
Can you hear me? Let's
Yes.
try. Oh,
Yep,
okay.
I can hear you. So just read
Sorry
this
about
page.
earlier. All right. A university biomedical researcher is working with a coach to improve their interactions with colleagues. The client is a very analytical thinker and can easily explain detailed data points and complex graphs, but seems reluctant to share anything personal with the coach. In previous sessions, the coach encouraged the client to describe how they feel at social events, but the client seems highly uncomfortable answering only with short one-word responses. That was part 1. Is there a part 2?
Yes.
The slides went off.
It's so true. Hang on one second. I'm just going to copy the link. There's somebody trying to get in. It's Claire from Vodafone. So the reason that our slides went off, my friends, is because my daughter's groceries just arrived, and therefore she has to go to the door and get the groceries. So I am going to pick up where she left off and share my screen. Is everybody able to see that?
Yes.
Okay,
So
perfect.
the part 2 is when the client arrives to their session today, the client silently hands the coach a journal. The client has written several detailed entries over the last week about their experience attending a university luncheon, a faculty party, and a staff development workshop since their last session. While the client says little to the coach in the moment, their entries show deep reflections about the anxiety the client experienced at these events and their desire to overcome social anxiety. What should the coach do?
Okay, should we talk about this for a quick moment before we go on? What are the principles here?
Trust and safety.
Trust and safety. Okay. Yep, they have not spoken about their emotions yet, and they've written all this in their journal. What else?
Is this about acknowledging that, appreciating that this was a significant thing to do, to talk about this, to share this, and kind of acknowledging the client's own sort of unique kind of character in this, and that this is a big, important step, appreciating it.
So supporting, acknowledging the client for what they've been able to express in the journal. Okay. What else? Anything else we want to say?
Yes, I'm also wondering, with the word anxiety, where's that a coach and where's that a counselor's remit? And so I guess I don't know until you see the options, but that's kind of just red flag a little bit there.
Okay, interesting.
It'd be interesting to know why the coach was interested in the client's social life, if that wasn't what was being presented.
Oh, about their social anxiety?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, well, that's where really kind of memorizing our PCC markers can be really helpful, especially if I wish I could have both my screens. Now that I'm sharing my screen, I can't see my PCC markers to know like which numbers they are. But in active listening, we learn that it's good to invite exploration around anything that the client brings up. So you would want to ask about their emotions, ask about the words they're using, ask about their body language. All of those things are very much involved in awareness building and active listening. So let's check out what the options are. All right, and so what would you guys pick? And once again, there's gradations of some perfectly decent options and best and worst. And thanks, Val, for putting competency 4 in the chat. That's really helpful.
Yeah, I like 4 as well, even though I think 1's the best. I think 4's a really
I like
good.
4 too. Yeah.
Okay. So we're liking 1 the best, and also 4 would be nice. What would be the worst?
Three.
Tell us what makes 3 the worst. Is that Nige talking?
Yeah, they just, it sounds really challenging to me.
Mm.
And it doesn't feel supportive. It doesn't feel helpful. It feels like, you said you're rubbish at this. What are you going to do about it?
It's really taking the person away from where they are, right? I mean, they're writing all these things about their anxiety, and the coach just says, okay, what steps are you going to take? That's not where they're at, right?
But 3 and 4 sound complementary as well. 4 is saying, okay, what you have learned about yourself through the journaling process, and then if there is anything you would like to think about overcoming any worries or anxiety. And then
those, Yeah, those might be potential things that a coach could do if the client's talking. I think in the scenario, the client really was just giving one-word
Right.
answers, was very anxious. And so if you ask a wide open question like, what awareness did you develop when the person just handed you a journal and they can barely talk? That might not be the best first move for the coach with this particular client, right?
Mm.
It's not a terrible coaching, it's a perfectly fine coaching question for someone, but we're responding to the whole person and their context. So let us see. Any surprises here? Nigel's like, that's exactly what I told you. Good for you. Abby?
Christy, presumably we won't know what which competency that, because that I feel is making a difference in a way, like knowing which we're looking at is helping to kind of, because particularly with the ones that would be okay somewhere in the coaching conversation.
Yes, I think you're right. And the test that I took, first of all, it was open book. Second of all, it told you we're in this section now. And so I'd love to hear from people who've taken, the people I've spoken to who have taken the new exam, which is so recent, couldn't remember if they tell you, but they did not think that they told you which section it was from, that they were maybe scattered. So you're just going to want to have these competencies really well memorized, as well as the code of ethics, so that when you get these really practical situations, you're so in the coaching mindset that you're like, okay, we leave the client at choice, we support whatever decision they make, we invite them to explore their emotions, just learn the wordings of how the competencies are stated so that you can recognize, okay, acknowledging, asking if they feel comfortable, inquiring about their emotions. Those are probably going to be very much in line with the competencies. If they're talking about their anxiety or writing about their anxiety and you ask them to name action steps, that's just not really sticking with the client very well. All right, we ready to go to the next one? Yay for us. This is feeling a little vulnerable, huh? Like, we have a little studying to do. So let's give ourselves a hand for being here today and being willing to learn and talk these things through. Okay, we are at practice question 5. Who would like to read this one? And I think I'm gonna, if it's okay, Kiara, are you ready to share your screen again?
I am ready.
All right, I'm gonna stop sharing mine. So I have a little, I wanna make sure I'm still pinned and all of that good stuff. So back over to you, Kiara. Practice question 5, part 1 is where we're at. Okay.
I can read it. I can read it, Christy.
Thanks, Alyssa.
Okay. A coach recently began working with a client to help them plan for retirement. The client is a well-respected teacher who has taught for 30 years at a local elementary school. The client consistently arrives highly prepared and organized for coaching sessions, routinely reporting progress between sessions and identifying specific topics to focus on during coaching conversations. The client shares they are looking forward to retirement, but they discuss their retirement plans in a very matter-of-fact way.
Okay, you want to read part 2 as well?
Sure. During the current session, the client shares that they have 2 weeks left before their retirement begins. They would like to focus on a few remaining plans they need to make. Suddenly, the client begins to cry and says, "I've spent half my life at this school. I adore my students, and my colleagues are my best friends. I can't imagine what my life is going to be like when I no longer walk through the front doors of the school each morning. What should the coach do?
Okay, so what are the principles here? Just about to retire, they've started crying. What does the coach do next? What would you do next?
Hand over a tissue first of all.
Okay, should we take a look at the, in the interest of time, those who need to leave at the top of the hour, please go ahead, but I will go through all 8 of these with anyone who can stay. All right, so what would you say is the best option?
It's definitely 4, I think.
Yogesh says 4, you would pause, acknowledge the emotional impact, ask if they'd like to spend time with their feelings. And what would make you choose that one, Yogesh?
I think you know, when you have got these heightened emotions, that's where I think the coach can be fully present with them and let them have that moment for them to feel what they need to feel. And then once they've dealt with that emotion and kind of, you know, return to a more calm or grounded state, then you can gently move them forward in the direction of your coaching objective for the session.
So you would stick with the client right there in their emotion that they're having in the moment.
And yeah, and sometimes you don't even have to say much. Let them take the time they need. It's almost like using silence more than saying something.
Yeah, coaching presence. Who would like to choose worst option?
I'd like to choose the worst option as 2.
Yeah, that's pretty bad, right? I mean, you certainly could,
I
but
would choose 1 as worst.
Okay. What makes 1 really bad for you?
There is no acknowledgement of the emotional outburst and feelings, and straight to the point, coach is coming. Okay, what is that you want to focus about? Number 2, I didn't choose because that might be an option to explore whether or not they still don't want to retire, and so can or wish to extend working and retire at some later stage when they feel ready.
So you're still asking them to choose something at least with 2, even if it might be a little abrupt, but asking them to get back to their retirement plans while they're crying might not go over.
Not maybe as in straight away question, but yeah.
And what do we have to say about number 3?
I like number 3.
Okay. And emotional responses are normal according to whom?
Humanity.
What's normal?
What's normal? And yeah, right. And so this is only the kind of comment. So there is a place for a coach to say what their own thoughts are, if they think it's normal, or if they believe it's a significant life transition, or they think that everyone thinks that. There is a place to do it only if they ask the client, how does that land with you? What are your thoughts? Does retirement seem normal to you? Does it seem, so the only time a coach shares their thoughts is if it's to also receive a response from the client. I think that is competency 7.5, if I remember correctly. So let's see, Kiara, what the ICF says is the best and worst. All right. Yay for us, right? Kiara, you want to give us a little celebration slide? Hooray! We're getting it. I feel like we're learning even as we're going through these questions, right? Which is really fun. All right, so
can I share an observation? So from the past 5 questions, the best answers that we have chosen is basically what we will do in a sequence. So what we'll do as a first response, I think, because like obviously it's hard to choose between a few good options, but the one that we have consistently been choosing is the first response. So is this the approach we should be taking? I mean, I'm not taking the exam now, but it's just a general question. Is this what we are doing here, the first response?
That is exactly right. Really great insight, because that's what coaching is, right? You're staying in the moment, and these things pop up, you know, something that the client brings in minute 10 of a session, you couldn't have necessarily predicted at minute 7. So it's not that you've planned out what you're responding to. You're responding to the whole person and their situation and their coaching goal and all those things in the moment, but always first the person, not their goal. Yogesh, did you have a hand up?
No, there was just a clap for Sidra.
Oh, clapping.
Insight.
Great. Yes, thank you. Thank you for bringing that insight to us, Sidra. Okay, we ready for question 6?
Happy to read if you'd like to.
Thank you.
A client is working with a coach to support them during an important career transition. The client currently holds a demanding role as chief operating officer of a company, while also raising 2 young children and serving as primary caretaker for the aging parents who live with the client. The client recently received job offers from 3 different companies, each requiring the client and their family to relocate. The client comes to the session excited about the new job opportunities and hopes to gain clarity through the session on which offer to choose.
Would you like to keep reading?
The client starts by discussing the things they're looking for in a new job, energetically listing opportunities for growth, challenging responsibilities, a talented team to lead, and the potential for travel. When the coach asks what the client's children and aging parents may need in a new community, the client's excited smile disappears and they're suddenly quiet. What should the coach do?
Okay, what would you do?
But the coach has asked a question here. Like, if you asked a question, are you expected to do the next thing?
So the coach has asked a question. What do your children and aging parents need? The client suddenly is not excited and smiling anymore, and they're quiet. Then what?
I would hold the space for the client, and they can respond whenever they're ready to, after done thinking in their mind.
So you would pause for a moment, or longer than a moment. What else? Who would like to add to the conversation?
Can you notice the change in them, that their smile has gone and they've gone quiet?
Okay, let's take a look at what the options are. Okay, so I think we've already said you would pause for a moment and then share with the client that you noticed a change in their energy. Ask if they want to explore. So that's kind of what we came up with before seeing the options. Are we going to go with that one for the best? What's the worst? Liani? I think you're saying number 1 is the worst. Is that right? You're going into the chat. Okay. Who agrees with Liani?
Yeah, 3 and 1.
Okay. Let's see what the ICF says. Okay.
I think the very fact that their energy changed means they got the question and they were deeply affected by it. So to repeat that would be condescending, I guess.
Either condescending or just showing the coach's discomfort with silence or something, but it's not an ability to really stay with the client in the moment with what's happening.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you. Okay. Let's keep going on. Yay for us. We made it through the first 6 competencies. We've got 7 and 8 to go. All right. Who would like to read 7?
I can do that.
Okay.
Part 1, a coach is working with a client who is an experienced marathon runner, writing a book on training for endurance races. This is a long-held dream for the client. The coach notices that the client often uses running metaphors when talking about their challenges and progress in their writing. The client is typically upbeat and energetic, but they arrive at today's session appearing tired and discouraged. They share with the coach that they have recently hit a wall in writing with 3 chapters remaining. When they sit down to write, the client says they can barely come up with anything and nothing that is worth publishing. The client says they're afraid they won't be able to complete the book on time and that all of their work toward this goal will be lost. What should the coach do?
Okay. What would you do?
I just noticed the kind of language they've described here, which is, they often use language related to the to running, etc., and metaphors related to that. And so I'd almost be tempted to flip this situation to ask, do you encounter this sort of situations when you're running, when you feel tired and you don't feel you've got the motivation? So in that case, what do you do? So, for a lot of these runners, it's about then taking a break, having some fluids, or maybe, taking a bite and then starting all over, and then, sort of taking baby steps and starting back all over again. So probably, just flipping the situation and making it relate back to how they deal with running.
Okay.
Yeah. And to add to it, I also see some limiting beliefs here. It's not worth publishing. It's not good enough. The work will be lost, etc.
Okay. Let's see what the options are. If I'm getting you right, Yogesh would pick number 3, right? You would go right for their metaphor, which is right in competency 7, creating awareness by using metaphor. What's the worst thing to do, in our opinion?
Be with them in that fear, which is probably 1.
Ask if they would like to explore their fear. Okay. What other thoughts do we have? Maybe someone who hasn't spoken yet and would like to.
I wonder that the second answer, because it's like giving an opinion, and it's a kind of supporting, but it's not allowing the space of. It's like in some way removing importance to what they just shared.
Right. So even though, and this is kind of a newbie mistake for a lot of coaches, is to get into that cheerleading role where you give your own opinion of like, you can do it. You've done big things before. You can do this one too. That's not where the client was. They were like, ugh, I got 3 more chapters. I just can't seem to do anything. And so we stick with our clients rather than kind of saying the opposite or kind of wanting it more than they want it. All right, so let's see what the ICF says is the best and worst. Wow us, I think we got it, right?
Mm.
So go for the metaphor and do not go stick in your own opinions unless you, it's just, you're not right. You're just asking to bounce something off, but stick with your client, right?
Quick question. I got tripped up just a little bit there. Wasn't that number 2 the worst?
Yeah, just thinking that.
Oh, okay.
Yes,
Okay.
the number was
I
changed.
was losing it. Okay.
Okay. I have like numbers blind spot, like I don't even see numbers, so that's a good catch. Kiara can change that a little bit later. Yeah, I never would have noticed the numbers. Thank you.
I think
Well,
this
any chance you have a J personality in your MBTI profile?
G is numbers blindness or huh?
No, sorry. Well caught that. So I was asking her if she's got a J in her MBTI personality. When you kind of go for like real accuracy and detail and things like that.
Could be. All right, we ready for practice question 8, which is about competency 8. All right. Someone who hasn't read yet, would you like to volunteer?
I can read it.
Thanks, Allison.
A coach has worked for 1 year with a client. The client has been identified by their supervisor as a potential leader in the organization based on their high quality work, good relations with peers, and innovative ideas for future projects. However, the client rarely speaks up in meetings with senior leaders, and when they do, they often downplay or diminish their ideas. The client's supervisor recommended coaching to improve the client's executive presence, with the ultimate goal of developing as a leader in the organization.
I'm going to read the next part too.
At the start of coaching, the client was often self-critical. However, the client has made tremendous progress in recent months. During their closing session, the coach notices that the client has a confident, easy smile. When the coach shares their observation with the client responds by saying, "I feel different, empowered, ready to take on new challenges." The client adds, "And I was just nominated by the CEO to be part of a leadership development program for emerging leaders in our company. What should the coach do?"
All right, what would you do?
I'd see if there's champagne at all.
Okay, open up some champagne.
Cheerleading is not an option.
Maybe you turn it around and you ask them, and how do you feel about that?
Okay.
So get their own perspective in terms of what potential do they see in that program, that sort of thing.
Okay. I would say, there's a difference between cheerleading and acknowledging. If the client is feeling really low and like, oh, I'm so frustrated, I still have 3 chapters and I just can't, and the coach is bringing all this energy, like, you can do it, and they're not matching the client and they're doing this cheerleading thing, that we don't do. However, matching the client, if the client says, I feel different, I was just nominated, like, I can't believe how, and they've got this smile, then noticing that, making a noticing comment that matches the client's already their level of energy is perfectly appropriate. You guys understanding the difference there?
So Christy, I think, one thing which you said was matching and mirroring, and sometimes you need to kind of reflect that in the moment energy back to the client. Second aspect is, this is slightly removed from this kind of situation. So for instance, some of you may have seen the recent Australian Open final between, I think, Rybakina and Sabalenka. So for instance, Rybakina is a very quiet sort of a competitor, doesn't show too much emotion on the court. and goes about her business, as against her coach is very animated. And so, for instance, if she does not give anything on the court, you can actually see a lot from the coach itself. And so if you look at that, that's almost like a complementary kind of relationship. So what you lack in one area, the coach can make up for it. But then obviously, that is in a different sphere, etc. Right? But I just wanted to bring to the table that it's not that you'll always have, say, the energies reflecting each other. Sometimes they can be complementary depending on the situation and what you want in the moment.
Yes, there are very few always and nevers in coaching. I agree. And when you do normally match your client and you normally stay in rapport with them and you're with them in their experience, then when you do offer on rare occasion an outside perspective or an outside look at things, thanks Abby and bye, then it really has an impact. When you said, can I offer you an outside perspective? Can I offer you a different take on this? How does that land with you? Then it's perfectly possible to occasionally mismatch for a coaching purpose, as long as the spotlight goes back to your client, not on your own opinions or thoughts or feelings about it. That makes sense?
Indeed.
Lovely. All right, let's see what the options are. I am just looking at the time, so what would you pick? Val says her best would be 1.
Yeah. 1 and 4, perhaps the worst. 4, perhaps the worst.
Yeah, that's suggesting.
Yeah. And that's in the interest of the coach more than the client itself.
Right. The client's all happy and celebrating their success. And you're like, look at me instead. How would we keep coaching? Right. Okay. So I'm sensing a certain amount of agreement here. Let's see, Kiara, what the ICF would say. All right. So I think we're getting there, right? We're doing a lot better on this as we're moving along through the questions. Like, yes, okay, we're sticking with the client, we're acknowledging, we're inviting, we're exploring, we're responding right in the moment to what's happening, and we are not suggesting and giving our own opinions and taking the opposite viewpoint without permission, etc. All right, Kiara, one last celebration. We made it through all 8 competencies. And so if you can go to the next slide really quickly. I recognize we're 15 minutes after the hour. You are very free to go. I am going to stay on for another 15 minutes and we'll stop sharing the screen. And those who would like to stay, I'd love to just hear, what are you taking away? What was your big insight from?
Christy, a question, if you don't mind, and apologies if you've answered this before.
Yeah,
so
Kiara, can you stop sharing the screen so I can see everyone? Thank you. Okay.
So the question was simple. I mean, we're choosing the best and the worst option, which also means that there are 2 close correct answers, right? Do you get any credit for those 2 correct answers, or get less penalty at all? Or is just about always selecting the best and the worst?
Best and worst. And you've got, you pass with 75%.
Okay.
Correct.
You pass with 75% correct. And the distinction is at 90 or more? Or...
Oh, I don't know. I don't know that they have distinctions.
All right. Okay.
No, I think it's just pass fail, and that if you've, I forget what the exact number is. It's like a score of 460 out of a possible 600, which is about 75%. Then you'll find out right away that you passed, and then it'll take the ICF a few days after hearing back from Pearson VUE to send you your credential.
Yeah.
What are we taking away? I'd love for anyone who wants to speak to go ahead.
I guess, just taking that extra moment to analyze the options before you make like a snap judgment. And sometimes the devil could be in the detail.
Right, the exact context of who this person is. Can you each, if you would like to share an insight, I don't want anyone to feel like they need to, but I do want to offer everyone quickly an opportunity. Can you just put an emoji of your choice over your name if you would like to share your insight?
I learned, I think to begin with, my answers, my were consistently wrong, but from question 4, I think I started to get the hang of it. And my takeaway is first best response, which we as a coach will take. And the least we will do is the worst option.
Thank you. Yeah. Liani, are you happy to share an insight from today?
Yes, in a way, it's not obvious. It's quite sneaky. And in a way, I'm thinking, how can I practice mentor coaching thought patterns in a peer coaching structure? That we can kind of practice the feedback, filling in the form and just cross-referencing with each other to really get it, because I don't know if memorizing the competencies are really going to anchor it in my gut response, as Sidra highlighted.
You'd like to learn from actual practical experience in the peer coaching and try things out, so you see that back and forth in the moment. Okay, great. And I saw Suzanne is writing in the comments to analyze the options, stay calm, look at the details of the situation, of the client, of your emotions. So there are actually no more practice questions. These are the 8 that are offered by the ICF for our learning. And so the best we can do is what Liani's talking about: practice with your clients, and really know and learn the code of ethics, the definition of coaching, and all of the competencies. And so if you are a member of Awaken Coach Institute, you have access to all of this in the mentor coaching course, where we have links to the PCC markers, we have links to the ICF videos about the competencies. I will make sure we post this, and I see in the comments also that you'd like to start using these with the Awaken. I know a number of you stay in touch regularly to coach each other in triads and in the peer coaching community. So yeah, get to know your competencies really well and practice them. Anyone else want to offer some insights? Karen?
Well, I discovered that I could pick the best option, but the worst option was so hard for me. So I think that I too need to, just go over and over and over these core competencies. And it's like the worst options all seemed really bad to me. So I couldn't figure out what was the best of the worst. I don't know.
Which one was the worst of the worst?
A lot. Yeah. It was very, that was harder for me. So I'll need to just pay more attention, I think, and relearn some things, maybe. I don't know.
What really struck me as I was going through these practice questions and sorting them out in my head was it seemed like anytime the coach went away from the client, it was just going to be the wrong, like anytime you're just like, well, they're talking about their emotions, but I'm going to talk about their plans, or I'm going to choose this direction to go, or, I'm going to give my, it was just about the coach and what the coach thought or felt or wanted to do next, or wanted to add to things. And it seems to me that the more you're coach focused and the more distant you are from the client, the worse the answer. Even if you're being super happy cheerleader, which we think would be a good thing to do, if that's not where your client is, it's not going to be helpful. Other insights? Sorry. Go ahead, Yogesh. You have a question?
How many of these total questions we have? 81, do I remember?
Yes.
So I think one of the other things which I thought was these 8 questions were intensive enough for us to process. So if we have to go through an exam of 81 questions, I think, taking those breaks and kind of, just using our energies in the right way, I suppose, because otherwise, after a while, we may get into that, okay, can't now put as much attention as I did with maybe, first 30 or 40 questions, and you sort of, start going fast. And I now know that passing criteria is 75%, which means you really don't have too much room to get things wrong as such.
Mm-hmm. You have a couple minutes per question, so you really want to go into it. First of all, I've heard that it's really not that fun, the whole tech stuff and downloading their software and making sure and taking pictures. Like, you kind of get into this, oh no, I'm a criminal mindset. So it's really important to let go of that and get back into this is a coaching exam. We're talking about human to human connection here. We're getting into the coaching mindset. Pearson View is not the ICF. It's not Awaken. Let's get back into our warm embrace here. And then what I've heard from those who've taken the new exam is that it goes a lot quicker than you think. They give you 3 hours, which is the same as the former exam. Now it's 40 questions, then a 5-minute break, and then the second half, because they were pregnant women having to pee in the middle of the exam, and they had to cancel their exam. So anyway, they've just changed that as of tomorrow. So people are telling me that it's taking about an hour and a half to finish. And these are able-minded native English speakers that I've talked to. So I don't have the perspective yet, and I'd love to hear from you if English is a second, third, fourth language. I know it does exist in other languages as well. Or if you have visual problems, or you have slower reading capabilities, I would love to hear what the experience is like for you. I know they do have accommodations, but the people that I'm talking to are saying that once you get into the groove and you're like, okay, this is coaching, we know how to be with clients, and you've really looked at your competencies, which I know everyone at Awaken has looked at them a lot, because you get at least 6 forms that you fill out for your observations, and then another several during mentor coaching that you do yourself. Take those really to heart and learn the nuances of the words that's used and what that means. What does it mean to partner with the client? What does it mean for the client to be a choice? So Val's asking if you can retake. I'm not aware of any limit on how many times you can retake it. I know that there's you can retake it for an extra $105 US.
There used to be a time in between when you could as well. There's like a 6-week period in between taking your first and your second as well. But,
I'm not aware of that, but
it used to be.
We'll make sure on our mentor coaching course that there's a link to the page that has all the ICF's information.
Nobody's going to need a second exam. They're all going to pass it first time. It's going to be, we're going to
play
so well.
We've got 100% pass rate at Awaken so far. So let's keep it going and keep encouraging each other. And I'm just sad because I don't think I'm ever going to get to take the new exam. So I'm counting on you guys to let me know. I know that you take the new exam for your ACC, PCC, MCC anytime you get your next credential, but not for credential renewals. So I don't know that I'll get to take it. So you all keep me informed and post in our learning hub how it went when you pass, and we get to celebrate with you. All right. Anything else that needs to be said before we wrap up today?
I think for me, what I kind of heard today, because I'm sorry, I joined really late because I was on school runs and things. And it's almost like all of us can probably now drive, and we drive like this, and we drive like this, and we like cross our hands over and things like that. When you do this exam, you go back to the way that you were taught to drive and the absolute basics of hold it at 10 to 2, and you look and you change, and the real basics. And I think that's what you've got to remember when you do this, is you have to go back to the pure side of doing this, not the flash the guy to come out, hey, thanks. No, keep your hands on the steering wheel at all times and drive with caution. And I think that's kind of what I think you need to do when you do this exam.
I totally agree, except for that when I did go back to retake my driving exam in America in my late 40s, I failed miserably with Gail the Fail as my instructor, and none of us are going to do that. We're all going to remember how to drive. So thank you, Claire.
Taking an exam is totally different from learning how to practice with our clients. So our focus is to take the exam, that's it. And when we practice and we stay with our clients, it's totally different.
Yeah. Well, and hopefully when we even went through today's exercise, prepping for the exam, we remembered a few things about real life that, okay, how do we want to be with our clients?
Yeah, I was going to share, it's so helpful to see these examples in the practice and the conversation between each, because I experienced similar to what Karen shared. It was either what Karen shared or it was the exact opposite. It was that every one of these answers could actually make a lot of sense when I'm choosing the worst, depending upon what's happening with the client. So I want to acknowledge again, Cedra, if you're still on the call, I'm not sure, I can't see you anymore. But around that question 4, Mark, when you mentioned, oh, I've noticed this observation that it's actually about responding immediately to what is happening now with the client. That's actually what we should be doing in coaching all the time, and not making assumptions about, well, this could be happening or that could be happening, or telling ourselves a story or getting wrapped up. It's responding to immediately what's happening in the moment. And for me, that's exactly what we should be doing in our day-to-day coaching. So this was really helpful just to have that perspective of, oh, what we are doing is a dance. We are following their lead. And it feels really jarring if they're in this emotional state and we're like, great, so what action plans do you want to do as a result of it? Doesn't make sense. It just doesn't feel like it's really, really dancing. So I appreciate this. And it's just brought us back to, how am I really dancing with my clients day to day, every day? Because that's exactly what we should be doing. So thank you. This has been so great.
Beautifully said. I think that's a great place to wrap up. I'm going to stop the recording now.